Okay, hi. This video is going to be on why you're afraid to love. Everybody's reasons are very different, but at one point in time in everybody's life, we've all had to experience this, and maybe not for some people, but it's many different reasons why a person can be afraid to love. And so one of the reasons why a person can be afraid to love is because their childhood, okay? So a lot of times, whatever we go through in our childhood stems up to us as adults, okay? So a lot of times when we have not been taught and trained properly and effectively what love looks like and what it should be, and when we've been taught the opposite of love, which is not loving, shutting down, running away, shutting down mentally, emotionally, in every aspect. So a lot of the times what happens is that our childhood plays a major role in why we are afraid to love as we become older as adults, And a lot of times when we carry that into our adulthood, we get in relationships. And a lot of times what happens is when you start to really, really make progress with a person and you start to get close and you start to really build a bond, and this probably has happened to a lot of women, and I'm not saying it's probably happened to men too, because women and men do it. What happens is that the person will either self-sabotage the whole situation or where it could go, or they will run away, they'll ghost you, or they'll completely detach, or they'll completely shut down, okay? And a lot of times the reason why we go through these transitions within us, and a lot of times why people do this when it comes to being afraid to love, is because it stems from the childhood and what they've been through, okay? And I always say this in every video: when you have not healed internally from your wounds from childhood, then you take that into your adulthood. You take that into your relationships. You take that into every other area in your life, and it spills over. And that's why it's vital and it's important that you do the internal work to heal from your childhood, so that you can be able to love somebody more in an effective, in a proper, in the right way that they need to be loved, okay? And another reason why it's hard for some people, and they become so afraid when they start to fall in love or to love a person, is because it's their lack of low emotional intelligence, okay? And what I mean by low emotional intelligence is that a lot of times when we operate from that, what happens is that we'll start to panic at every little situation, or we'll start to just have outbursts out of nowhere over something, or the fear of loving somebody. So if you've ever been in a situation with somebody and everything was going great, and all of a sudden they started to have outbursts out of nowhere, that's low emotional intelligence. Because what's happening is that it's the fear of loving another person. It's the fear of that love, So a lot of times that's another way that people become afraid, and they afraid to love. So everybody understanding in there how they cope with it is very different, okay? Some people, the reason why they're afraid to love is they've been hurt in the past in other relationships. And when you don't properly heal and you don't properly allow yourself the time to heal internally, then what happens is when you meet somebody or you start to love somebody, you'll either detach, you'll run, or you'll ghost them. Men and women do it. And the reason why that is because, or you'll become real defensive when you start to love a person, or when you are afraid to love. You'll become defensive and you'll start to find everything wrong with that person. Why? Because it's just a fear of loving. It's the fear of being afraid to love. And a lot of times the reason why we go through these moments like this is because it could have been a past relationship. It could have been other situations where we failed, or the situation didn't work out and we got hurt in that. Okay. And so what happens is that it becomes a defense mechanism where you start to use that to push people away that you start to love. Okay. Another reason why a lot of times we are afraid to love, it's because our own self-worth, our own self-confidence, our own worthiness, our own self-love. A lot of times when we are afraid to love, it's because we don't feel like we're lovable. We don't feel like our self-confidence, our self-worth, who we are as a person is even lovable. And so what we will do a lot of the times, we will just self-sabotage the situation off bat. Because why? We don't feel like we're worthy of being loved. I always say in every video, what you attract is what you are. Okay? So a lot of times when we don't feel like we're even loving our own selves, or we don't feel lovable for ourselves, or we have not even accepted the fact that we are lovable and we deserve to be loved, what happens is that other people will see that about us, and that will begin to project onto them. And then what happens is we'll start to fear that that person won't love us or they'll reject us. And instantly we're already ready to self-sabotage the situation. Okay? So a lot of the times, the reason why we are afraid to love is many different reasons. And when you sit back and self-reflect on why you are afraid to love, I know anything I bring it from personal experiences. It's not Googled, it's from personal experience that I have been through. So a lot of the times when we are afraid to love, it's really, really the root of us not loving ourselves. Because when you don't know how to properly and effectively love yourself the way you're supposed to, nobody else is going to love you. You'll always have a fear, and you'll always be afraid to love. And that's why it's important to understand that for women and men, if you've been ghosted, if somebody just totally detached from you, if you were getting close with somebody and you knew that it was going into a phase of love and they just totally self-sabotage, understand that it's reasons behind that. You may not know the reasons, but everybody has a reason for when they struggle with this type of thing. Okay? And the only person that can get to the root of that is that person itself. Okay? So a lot of the times we are afraid to love because we fear. And you got to understand, what is the opposite of fear? Love. So when you look at all of these situations and why we are struggling and why we're so afraid to love, it's because the root of all of that is fear. Fear that you are not good enough. Fear that you are not pretty enough. Fear that you are not worthy enough. Fear that they will reject you. Fear that came from your childhood and how you was treated. Fear that came from your past relationships and how they didn't work out and how your heart got broken or you got hurt. Fear. All of that is wrapped around the base of fear. So that's why it's important that you first learn how to love yourself. You first learn how to really love yourself. You first learn how to really understand your own self-worth, your own self-value, your own self-respect. And when you can learn how to genuinely love yourself for who you are, when you can learn how to genuinely understand that you have to learn how to love your own soul within before somebody else can see the beauty that's within you internally. You have to do that for yourself first. And when you do that, I promise you, you will begin to attract people that will begin to see your beauty. And you'll begin to attract people and relationships. And you won't have to jump man to man or woman to woman. And that's why, another reason why people are afraid to love. And they'll continue to jump woman to woman, man to man. Why? Because they are afraid to love. So everybody is different. But I just encourage you guys to understand that love first starts within yourself. Genuine, divine, pure love starts genuinely within yourself, internally first. It starts with you loving your own soul. It starts with you connecting with your own self and becoming your own soulmate first. And then you will begin to know how to genuinely love somebody without self-sabotaging, without running away, without detaching. And you'll begin to know how to properly love them and also properly love yourself back in return. Okay, love you. Bye-bye.